Namaste. Let's start with the Shanti Mantra. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. दिवि भूमौ तथा काशे बहिरन्तश्च मे विभुः यो विभात्यवभासात्मा तस्मै सर्वात्मने नमः. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. What we refer to as God, what we refer to as Bhagavan, etc. In the other cases, Yoga Vasistha does not refer that way. It is basically the pure Sat. The pure being is what is supposed to be the ultimate reality, ultimate Brahman. So that's a stand consistently he takes throughout the Yoga Vasistha. And the discussion between the Rama and Vasistha is also pointing towards this aspect of it very clearly. And the whole of text, it goes in that way. Especially when it comes to the practice, then prana is given so much of importance here. One is that at the chitta level clarification, the other thing is at the prana level understanding. Two important aspects, that is where Yoga Vasistha focuses on that. And one such very important aspect of sadhana is the prana, and the story of Bhushandu becomes very important, pertinent in the case of understanding about the prana and what is the way that Bhushandu has attained that particular state. Another thing is Yoga Vasistha gives in terms of various stories. Though the discussion is between Rama and Vasistha is trying to give Rama the wisdom. And now here there is another thing. It is Vasistha Rama Samvada. Samvada has a very important meaning, idea behind it. And that is, Vasistha is not, we use the word called counseling. Vasistha did not counsel Rama, nor Krishna counseled Arjuna. We have to understand it this way, that it's a dialogue that goes on between these two, close to the idea of samvada. But then the samvada is, there is no ego anywhere. We have to rise above in the way of wisdom, understanding, and then living that. In fact, that's one of the reasons why in the Shankara Mandana Mishra Samvada, at the end of the Samvada, Mandana Mishra becomes the disciple of Shankara. It's not the question who won, who lost. That's all in the case of argumentation, that's all in the case of, and much more in the case of when you say counseling, that somebody has to counsel somebody else. It's not the question of knowledge is important, but the question is that I teach you, I give you something. So it's not, this morning also, in case of while giving a talk on yogic counseling, said that this word of counseling, let's not have. It's yogic chintana that we do it. And in this chintana, that we evolve. And if Krishna was supposed to guide Arjuna, then to fight the war, then he would not have spent 700 shlokas. He could have said it in 2 chapters, and he could have raised his emotions and saying that, what are the suffering that you underwent because of the Kauravas? You don't deserve it, and Kauravas deserve to be punished. It was very easy. But at that time, it was not Arjuna's wisdom that's working, but it is emotion is the one which is working. And by working with the emotion, then you have not reached anywhere else. So the idea is to see that the growth takes place in the case of Arjuna's understanding. And the evidence for that is at the end of the last chapter, Arjuna says that my hands are steady, legs are steady, I can see very clearly. And then Arjuna, when he says like that and asks Krishna, what am I supposed to do it? Krishna says, you do what you want to do. Yathe chasa tata kuru. Finally, the decision comes from Arjuna himself. And this is a very, very important point that we need to understand in yoga. That is not the question of the whole of jnana yoga, not the question of that somebody tells somebody to do something or the other, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not like that. It's a way that you understand and your own wisdom guides you in that direction. So this is the way that you develop the whole aspect of it. That's the beauty of the samvada. Here also, Vasistha gives various points to Rama so that ultimately it is the Rama who rises above and then meets with that particular requirement. And that's the reason why you can see that in Rama's questions also, the urge to see that how he can spiritually grow, spiritually enhance himself. And that's what basically leads to all these stories. So before going to the story of Bushindu, that let me recollect that there are certain portions which are there in prior to that, in the contemplation of the self, in the earlier chapter where the discussion goes on. And the discussion is very important, very pertinent in this particular point of view. So let's look into that. The 14th sutra, the page 207, he says, Saptapuryashtaka yatra chit sthitaha dukkadaini mukandha jadavat yatatra satta matrena tishtati. Where the consciousness remains asleep with the eightfold body, the 5 subtle elements and the 5 mind, intellect and ego, and the giver of sorrow, and it is the giver of sorrow. It remains there merely as existence, like a dumb, blind and dull person. Now, this is a very important aspect of it. We need to understand that is, all these senses, they work because of the consciousness. It's actually eyes look through, because of the consciousness is looking through the eyes. Consciousness is hearing through the ear. And it is the consciousness which is working through your mind, intellect, and consciousness itself has become ego. So all these things are the consciousness which are really working. But how many of us we really realized? In fact, there is nothing else other than the consciousness which has become everything. The whole creation itself is nothing but consciousness. And we are also part of the creation. The realization is that I am that universal consciousness, and whatever that is there confined within this is what is called as the Jivatma. So I identify myself, I realize myself that I am the Jivatma. Then the moment that I leave this body, I become one with the Paramatma. There's only one consciousness, supreme. That's what is left with. But then what happens is, Chit sthita dukkha, chit sthita, that means to say, all these consciousness becomes quiet, consciousness is sleeping, consciousness is alive, is not alive, but Saptapuryashtaka yatra, that means to say all these eightfold body, which is supposed to be 5 subtle elements. Ashtaka means 8, and Supta Puryashtaka yatra chitsthita dukkadaini. These eightfold body that is supposed to be your senses, are your pancha indriyas and also the body. When these things are working, the mind, intellect and ego, when they are functioning, but then behind that the consciousness is not there. The consciousness is sleeping. And when that is there, it is the giver of sorrow. Why is it supposed to be giver of sorrow? The simple idea is that whatever the way that these things divert us, whatever the way that these things are dragging us, we go behind it. We don't have any willpower to see that we change the course of whatever that is going on. This is something about the human being. In fact, in the case of all other species, that this consciousness is not there, and all other species also, that they have all these senses, and then subtle aspects that they are there, but and then they're functioning. But what happens is when they function within the framework of whatever that they're meant for, that they're capable of doing it. So therefore, that there is no question of a struggle in them. They don't look at something else and then try to imitate, are driven by something else, driven by their desires. All these things are not there. Their life goes on as the way that they are. Like, for example, no dog wants to become a horse. No horse wants to become a dog. Dog is perfectly the dog, horse is perfectly the horse. And even though that there is horse races, whatever the way that one horse can ride speed, and then it catches that the other horse, it doesn't bother about whether the other horse is going ahead or not. So there is no question of competition, there is no question of problem with them. As that they're fine. They, after finish that race, they just go and then eat their food. Master says, you are shabash, wonderful, that you have done a great job, fine. Master says, you failed me miserably, that I lost because of you and all that. It's okay. The horse does not make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to the horse. So this is how that they are, whatever the way that they are, They don't have any dukkha. But the human being has a dukkha. And then what is the dukkha human being? The moment he is not conscious, the moment that this consciousness aspect is not there, then all these things enter into him. He becomes competitive, he becomes comparing, and he wants to achieve something which he is not capable of doing it. And all these things happen because that he is gone by the world outside. You see that all these ashtaka, that means all those 8 things that are there, they are to interact with the world, that's all. It's not to compare and make your life miserable. It's not to see that you go into the rat race. That is not the idea. That is basically to see that you interact with the world outside. But we create all those things because that the outside becomes important. If you are identified with your consciousness deep inside, then outside does not become important. It's all right. That's why George Bernard Shaw used to say very beautifully, saying that why that you give, 10 players this side, 10 players there, and one football in between so that they keep fighting. Give each one of them one football that they'll be playing it. There'll not be any fight at all. So now there's one football is there, then everybody tries to fight with that. And if it's a football ground, yes, we do that for the sake of fun. But how many people take that football as fun? It becomes life and death question. My team has to win. Otherwise, my team does not win. The television in my house is broken. So all these problems come because that human being identifies so much with the world outside, not knowing that whether all those people who are there in the football field, the football and the field and everything, it's nothing but the same Brahman. It's but the same Atman that is there, which is in everything. If only one can realize that he is there, Atman, this is what is yatra chit sthita suptaha, where the chit, that means your consciousness, is not sleeping, it is sleeping, and the senses are working, then that's what is the dukkha-dayini. And then mukantha jadavat tatra satta matrena tishtati. Mukantha jadavat tatra, that means to say, it remains there merely as existence, like dumb, blind. And the dull person, mukhantha jadavat. The 5 tanmatras are the sensory objects, that is the sound, touch, form, taste, smell, together with the internal instrument. All those thinking mind and the ego, they were in the conscious spirit, whereas asleep, when the consciousness awake, it frees from the limitations, it shines as its own splendor. See, one small little thing, that is your consciousness is awake, or in other words, that you are awake. You are one with the consciousness. Once this happens, all these things they get the chetana. Otherwise, that they are jadavat. Jadavat means basically that they are just mechanical. They're working on there. So this is what Vasistha says to Rama. Supta puryashtakam yatra chit chita dukkhadayini mukandha jadavat. Muka, that means it is dumb, andha, blind, jadavat. Tatra satta matrena tishtati. Now Sri Rama vacha. So that means to say sattva matrena samsthanam mukte sannihitam khalu. Now Rama puts very sharp question, very deep intriguing question, and that is it not firmly abiding by the mere existence close to liberation? Is it not liberation that you become conscious, you become aware? And it looks very important. It's a very important question because many places this is what is the way that almost like indicates. Like for example, Krishna in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he says that once you establish yourself in prajna, that's what is the highest realization. That's why he says that sthita prajnasya ka bhasha. Somebody is established in the prajna, that means he is conscious. He becomes one with the consciousness. Then there is nothing else to achieve. That's what is the highest state of samadhi, highest state of experience. So, satta matrena samsthanam, that means firmly establishing in the existence. Is it not close to the liberation? Is it not the freedom that you have? Mukte sannihitam khalu. Is it not mukti? Is it not freedom? Or after that, we need to do something else also? Should we really do something different other than that? After achieving that, something else that we need to get it? So this is a question that Rama asks. At what a subtle level that Rama is asking that question. Now, there is one very important thing about us, that this maintaining this awareness seemed to be like an experience, like an exercise that we can do. I continue to maintain my awareness, and now I can see that my awareness is much better, much more close mouth. So that way, this consciousness is something which is so important, and it is something that we can develop. We are always aware of it. That's one aspect of it. Second aspect is being aware seems to be a tax on us. Is it something which is forcefully done, or is it something which is spontaneous, which naturally happens? There are two different aspects of this being conscious, being aware of. One thing is that being aware of in a pressurized way, constantly being aware. It's like you have woken up a policeman within you. And that's not the idea of spirituality. That's not being free. And that's not being joyful, blissful. That means there is somebody constantly watching you. And you become that watching. And then once you develop this watchman within you, it's all negative. But then what is the way that this should not become a negative, that your awareness? There are two types of awareness. I always talk about this with an example, that when the moment that we say that I'm aware of the consciousness, that awareness is there, immediately I'm aware of what is wrong, what is bad. Oh, I'm falling here, I'm telling a lie, or I'm being driven by the senses, I'm being driven by the object outside. This is what you become aware. You try to withdraw yourself from that. It's like this awareness is like walking on the tightrope. Any moment you can fall, therefore that you are trying to guard yourself. You know what, actually, if I ask you to simply walk on the street, you can walk very comfortably without any hesitation. But whereas if I put two lines marking 1 foot gap and ask you to walk on between that 1 foot, still okay, but then it's still difficult, because that moment that you touch the line, that you lose. Therefore, you have to walk in between that. So it becomes difficult. Whereas the same 1 foot or 2 feet wide line, I elevate it from the ground level. I put it on the wall, which is about 10 feet above, and ask you to walk on that wall. Then you can see how difficult it is. The same 1 foot, the same thing that you are walking, or same 2 feet wide, but the same place that you are. But now it becomes difficult. Why? Because now the fall becomes much more dangerous, painful, suffering. So look at the way that the moment that you rise above, you rise it above, then the fear comes into the picture, you become tense. So this awareness becomes tenser and tenser the moment that you become very careful about the whole thing. In that case, actually what is happening is that your focus is not on walking, your focus is on possibility of falling. Your focus is on the negativity, not on the positivity. And Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, this is not the awareness. Awareness is not about the weakness, awareness is not about the problems, difficulties, fall, but awareness is about the positivity. You give an example of an estate and where that there is some watchman is there, watchman is perfectly aware. He's aware of where something can enter into the estate by scaling the wall, something can slip inside under the fencing, something is weak, something is there, which was there yesterday, it is missing today. Aware of all those things. And that awareness is a burden. 8 hours he can maintain. Shift, afterwards he has to give it up and come out. Whereas there's another person who is aware. It's not 8 hours, it's 24 hours. And that's what is the owner. Owner knows where they have a garage and where the vehicle can be repaired, where this is there, where that is there, all those things he is also aware. And his awareness is 24 hours awareness. What's the difference between that? The difference between that is that the watchman's awareness is negative awareness, where something can be lost, where something can be a problem, whereas owner's awareness is positive awareness. You are an owner to the body. You are an owner here. You are the consciousness yourself. So therefore, when we talk about the owner's consciousness, be conscious, or the sthita prajna, it's supposed to be owner's awareness. It's a full of bliss and joy. What are the positive things that you have? Just put aside all the negative things. And somehow what happens is that the more and more that we grow in intellect, the more and more that we seriously become learners, we start becoming aware of negative things, not only within us, but the others also. We keep saying, look at that other fellow, that he doesn't even maintain a discipline of getting up in the morning. He doesn't even discipline doing yoga, or in the food that he doesn't have discipline. So all these things, then look at that. It's awareness about negativity within you, awareness about negativity of the world outside. Everywhere it is painful. Whereas what is supposed to be is the positive awareness. So, satta matrena samsthanam, mukti sannihitam khadu. This itself indicates that it's not the question of awareness, but something which is that we need to be positive. We need to see that there is so much of positivity around. Vasistha vacha, buddhi purvam, vicharyaiva, yatha vastvala avalokanat, satta samanya bodho yaha, samokshasya sachanyatha. Having already investigated intentionally, so that on account of looking out for inquiry into reality, there is a knowledge of totality of existence, that would be liberation, not otherwise. This awareness that we have and this being conscious, we have already analyzed it, we have investigated into, we found out that this is the origin of the whole creation itself. This is nothing other than that pure universal consciousness that is there. And that's what is the reality. And this is the knowledge of the totality of existence. So having this consciousness and then recognizing that it is the totality of the existence, that would be liberation. If you did not convert it to that way, then it is not the question of liberation. The freedom is not there, because the simple thing is that you still get hooked into what is supposed to be, what can be negativity. The only way that you can have the liberation is that you come out of that negativity into the positivity. Then every moment is like a celebration. Every point is point of joy, bliss. Parignyaya parityagya vasananam upekshate antaha supta stita manda yatra bija havankura ivankuraha vasanatat sushuptatvam vidhi janma pradam punaha. The renunciation of mental impressions is required, the renunciation of vasananam parignyaya, vasana parityagaha. So the mental impressions of is inquired, is understood, parignyaya, to clearly know about it. That means to say the vasanas you know about it, and having thoroughly known them, and then you have renunciated it, parityagaha, you have given it up, and then where the dull mental impressions, antaha supta sthita manda yatra bija ivankuraha, and remains asleep within, like the sprout within a seed. Know that it to be through sleeplessness. Sleepiness or inaccessibility caused the birth again. As I earlier gave the idea that if you are only looking at the awareness and you don't have the totality picture in front of you, then what happens is this awareness, very great possibility of becoming negative. Very easily that's what is the stand that we take. Spirituality is not in negativity, neither in you nor in the world outside. In fact, if you are looking at something as negative, that means that you still have negativity within you, and you are in control of yourself. Not really that you have transcended that, but you have in control in a guarded way. That you guard yourself to be the state. So again, in that case, it is the dullness, it's a sleepiness, it is not available about the consciousness. See, opposite to the forces that are working, that you're only in that position. This also very often said that it is nirodha can be looked at two ways. One is that you suppress it, you hold it tight. The second thing is you transcend it. So when you have suppressed it, when you are holding it tight, any moment it actually builds up like a volcano, and any moment it can burst. When it can burst, then you can see that how much of disturbance it can create. Not only that, it can also give an idea that look, all this nirodha has really brought you to the misery. Otherwise you would not have had. Otherwise, if you did not do that, you would have had wonderful life like anybody else. We don't know really whether somebody else has a wonderful life or not. But we assume that that person has a wonderful life because he's involved in various things. So we assume that. It's always like this, is that a ordinary person in the world, he looks at the yogi and says how wonderful that he's become a yogi. But a yogi thinks that he feels sorry about it, he feels hard about it, saying that look at the other fellow person in the world. He's enjoying the world. The same world that I'm in, he's enjoying, whereas I'm not enjoying. I'm not able to enjoy that. So you always look at the other person and then you feel that that person is happier than you are. But both of you are happy only. You are same consciousness what you are, the other person is. Stavaradaya yete hi sishutta padamashritah tesha mantasthita eva vasanaha bijarupa. Now this, what we suppressed, is the vasana. That means our desires towards the object outside, our rush towards the object outside, or the calling of the object to world outside is what we call it as vasana. And so therefore, that when this vasana remains as hidden inside, in the form of dormant way. And any moment, it's like the way that bija, a seed outside. Seed outside looks stable, steady. It's like stone, and it's a nice, wonderful, polished stone like the seed looks. But then inside that there is this tree which is suppressed, which is held tight. The moment given an ambience, the tree comes out. The moment you put the seed in the soil, it comes in contact with the water. You can see that how it comes about. The same way that such a person from outside, very peaceful looking, very stable, steady, but then it's a stationary object like stone or tree, and like have indeed resorted to the state of thorough sleep or insensibility, the mental impression just exists within them in the form of seed. You have nearly not conquered the vasanas. That means to say, the very simple explanation of vasana is that you still have an extra joy in the objective world outside, extra ananda in the objective world outside. And you are ananda yourself. That's why I always give the example that an ordinary person goes to the objective world for the sake of happiness, whereas a yogi goes to the world material happily. That means his happiness himself and then involved with the world outside. And the objective world is there, fine, he is happy. If it is not there, also he is happy. It doesn't make any difference for him. So he doesn't have to run behind it. So this is the vasana that is there suppressed inside, so that you are missing the object outside. Once you are feeling the missing of the object outside, then naturally an earliest opportunity that you get into that. Not only that, you create a world where your vasanas will be fulfilled. That's how that, that in this life that you practice abstaining from the sex, abstaining from the opposite sex and all those things very strongly, that is spiritual. And that's all they do. Finally, what happens when you do all these things? Definitely that heaven is there, and then heaven, all the girls are there so that you can enjoy. In Islam, it's very strong. The jannat means that it is the heaven, and then there are girls waiting for you. Azmal Kasab, when he was narcotic test was being done, he said, did you realize that what is that you have done the wrong? And the next time an opportunity, do you do that? He still said, yes, I do it. Why? He said that my mullah promised me that once I go to Jannat, there'll be girls waiting for me. Girls will be waiting what to do, because that you are not going to go with this body. You'll be going there as a spirit. And the joy is there only because of this body and senses that are there. Otherwise, where is the question there? But then they don't realize that. So they create the Jannat, they create the heaven, and whatever that they suppress here. So therefore, it is mind creation. It's not anywhere else that you have spatially some place where all these people are there, all these things are there. Your mind has created. So therefore, that people create in their mind and then stay there. It's like the way that you are in the dream world. No bigger than that. No better than that. So what happens is that vasana bijavato, that really sprouts again. It comes back into the life in the form of your own dreams. Yatrasti vasana bijam tatsushuptam na siddhyate nirbija vasana yatra tatturyam siddhidam smritam. When there is a seed or the germ of mental impressions or the vasanas, then that is a state of sleep and does not bring about fulfillment or the self-realization, whereas the mental impressions is without the seed. That is the fourth state of consciousness, turiya, that's regarded as producing spiritual perfection. So turiya, the fourth state, what is described in the Mandukya, which is supposed to be a very beautiful model of the human existence, probably the best model about various ideas that are given in the philosophy, in the Sanatana Dharma. Idea of this Mandukya. In Mandukya, what happens? We exist in these three different levels of experience. One is the wakeful, the dream, and the deep sleep state experience. But apart from these three, that we have the fourth state, and the very name of it is Turiya. Turiya means fourth. So, Turiya is a state where there is no seed of these mental impressions that is available. And that's a state of sleep and does not bring about fulfillment, where the mental impressions are without the seed. And that is the fourth state of consciousness, Turiya, that's regarded as producing spiritual perfection. So these are the two things that are important. One is that you become quiet, you become peaceful, you become satisfied. But at the same time that you see that you don't have the seed of vasanas, your seed of the pulls from the world outside, and that's not there. You involve in the world happily. There is a very important point there, saying that even trying to run away from the world is also an indication that you have given importance to the world, and then world is something bad. It may not be contributing towards your happiness, that's fine. We say that yes, it's not contributing towards happiness, but I'm happy. This is one aspect of it, I'm happy myself. But the second aspect is that even this destroys my state of being. It can act as a hurdle. Even that also has to be given up. Even that has to be given up. So when that is not there, hello, hi, Satsang leading 4:30. Okay, right. Okay. So यत्रास्ति वासना बीजम तत्र शुक्तम न सिद्ध्यते nirbija vasana yatra tatturyam siddhate smritam. So now he here Stingly takes that point to say that you are beyond these vasanas. That's a very important state. Not even in the bija way that the vasanas exist. In fact, in the case of Buddha, Bodhisattva, that how subtly that vasana works is given. That he is a Brahmajnani, he left everything and is free from all those things, he is in the ashram. And in the last days, that somehow has to spend the time. So a small little antelope, deer, very beautiful, innocent deer, walks into the ashram. Then, because it came into the ashram, that he started feeding and then taking care of that. But in the process, what happens, he forgot that his nature, and then he become one with the deer. His mind is filled with the deer. Now then when he dies, next life he comes as a deer, because that's what he's groomed, his ideas, with the kind of wisdom that a rishi has, a sage has. And then there are Jataka Katha stories where tell the stories as a deer giving the stories. I mean, it's a beautiful idea to give that idea, how much that your vasanas can, small little way also that influences, and next life that he is liberated from that aspect also. Vasanayaha tatha vakhne shrungya vyati dvishamapi sneha vaira vishanam cha sheshaha salpeti badhyate. Now, even the little residue of mental impressions are the vasanas as well as that of the fire, vasanaya tatha vakhne, that means fire, runa, debt, and then vyadhi, disease, and dvesham, that means to say animosity, api, sneha, oiliness or affection or attachment, and sneha, vaira, that means hostility, and poison, vishanamcha, shesha, swalpepi badhyate. Even the small little residue that is there of all these things, they can bind you, they can hold you. And the little of these residue of your vasanas, and what are these vasanas? The residue of the fire, that means to say, you want to consume that aspect of it. Second thing is debt, That's why we have such an idea that we would like to, the greatest of the bondages we used to say in our scriptures, it is the bondage of death. Death. I don't think anywhere in the world that this concept is there. The earliest you come out of the debt, the better it is. You should not be in debt. In fact, whereas the other cultures, they say that take the money, borrow the money, beg the money, and live happily. That's what they say. Runam krutva ghrutam puvet. That was the idea of charvakas of this particular country also. But whereas the real teaching of this particular culture, Sanatana Dharma, is to see that runamukti, runa, you come out of that runa. And there are different types of runa that is given. Runa to your teacher, runa to your culture that you need to do. Runa to your ancestors. You have to do certain rituals to see that you come out of the runa. Pitruna, Devaruna, Rishi Runa. These are all the things that we need to come out of. 5 different types of runa that is there. So we have to free ourselves in this life to see that we are free from the runa. The runa is given such an important. Debt is given important. Debt is not in terms of only money. Debt in terms of your service. Your parents, you need to take care of. It's so deeply ingrained in our culture, Sanatana Dharma. I came across several people during the time that they are alive. Our parents are alive. And probably because of some pressure of work or whatever it is, or the family conditions, they would not have taken care of their parents. They might have put them in the etc. etc. But then after they die, I've not taken care of my mother, I've not taken care of my father. I should have taken much more. I could have done much more. Again, this is what the guilt that you have to taken care of, you should have taken care of, stays for a lifetime, and then you can't overcome that. This runa is so extraordinary concept that is there in the Indian philosophy. Similarly, you borrowed from somebody some money, and then you can't give back that money, you couldn't give back. Meanwhile, that person left the body. In this culture, Sanatana Dharma, feel, oh my God, I borrowed from him, I could not give it back. That runa is there. I have to take care of it. That's what is the story of Rama's also. He says, Dasharatha asked me to go to the forest, I have to go to the forest. And, Jabal, Rishi and all that, they come. Dasharatha is gone. Now he is not there. Why don't you come back? I said, if he were there, it must have been much more easier. But then now he is not there. I just cannot violate that. The runa continues to be there. And there's a very beautiful discussion that goes on about how himself has freed himself from that runa, Dasharatha. That's what, when the discussion is going on, at that point of only Vasistha knew, and then Rama knew about it. And Rama recollects that the Bharata did not know. Lakshmana did not know. And Bharata says that, look, I'm your younger brother, you are my elder brother. Therefore, that you become the king, I will not take the kingdom. That time, the last argument that Rama recollects, that saying that, but dear Bharata, it is neither your kingdom nor my kingdom. It's not the father who promised me to become the Yuvaraja and all those things. But this happened way back this happened. And what is that, what happened? And that was when father was very young and he had already 2 wives. That's what is Kausalya and then Sumitra. But then they were barren, they didn't have children. At that point of time, he came across Kaikeyi Raja, and then he saw Kaikeyi. And then he proposed himself. And Kaikeyi Raja says that she's going to be the 3rd wife. But then, can you promise me one thing? That the child born to whatever this Kaikeyi should be the kingdom, should have the kingdom. And at that point of time, Dasharatha, because he was young and he didn't have children at all,